Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Let's talk about the lunar eclipse in Sagittarius, which is coming up on the 26th of May. This lunar eclipse is the beginning of the lunar eclipse season in terms of technicality. That is, that this is the first lunar eclipse of the year. We've got 4 eclipses in total for the rest of the year, and so this is the first one. I've been reflecting a lot on this today and just contemplating and looking at the chart, looking at the full moon, which is the lunar eclipse. And, you know, I think I'm just going to really try and approach this from a much more optimistic and positive level because, we've just got so much going on at any given moment in our lives. We're dealing with so much, right? Um, with our responsibilities, our commitments, our spiritual journey, our relationships, our work life, etc., social life, and so forth. And so we've always got a lot on our plate. And sometimes when we are looking at everything that's happening astrologically, um, we just tend to get so, all consumed or preoccupied with this is coming up, that's coming up, this is coming up, we're in this right now. And sometimes we just forget to kind of just enjoy the moment, right? And so I was meditating on this today and thinking this full moon in Sagittarius um, needs to be for us just a moment of experiencing just a bit more optimism, a bit more faith, a bit more confidence, a bit more enthusiasm, about the things that actually are going really well in our life. Not everything is disastrous, right? Not everything, not every day, and not every moment is crisis, So I just want to, put this out there and encourage us all to be receptive to the energies of this full moon eclipse, to embrace the Sagittarian quality from the best possible level. The best possible level of Sag is that absolute urge and desire and thirst for wisdom and truth and higher understanding, right? But if we just even pull back from those bigger components of Sagittarius, it is on a very simple level, it's the ability to feel confident, to feel confident in your life and your purpose in life, right? And to see the meaning in things that are unfolding, but to learn to kind of step back as well and not become all consumed by it, which can become quite an intensified process. So, Sag invites us to have a bit more of a light heart, right? A lighter, sort of, a lighter stepping in our walk, right? So let's try and just embrace the positivity of what this energy can bring. Because the other thing is that the solar eclipse, which is going to be the next eclipse after this lunar eclipse, which is in Gemini, is a really, really creative and favorable Saros cycle of eclipses. That the family of eclipses that the June eclipse belongs to is just a really creative cycle that has a lot of psychic awareness, psychic messages, psychic clarity, and so forth that comes through. And that's important because that's just next month. It's not very far away at all. And so we're really dealing with, at the moment, Sagittarius lunar eclipse, which is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is the benefic, the planet that does bring joy, deep joy. It absolutely has the potential to do that. Um, and also, this energy with the lunar eclipse is very Pisces, Jupiter, Neptune based, if you like, right? I'll bring up the chart in a moment and we'll look at that. Um, Also, of course, have a look at where the new moon was in Taurus, which was conjunct Uranus, just 2 weeks ago. and follow that, track that in terms of now where the full moon, the lunar eclipse, will be relative to your birth chart. So something that began a couple of weeks ago uh, could be highlighted for you, obviously, during this time, because the full moon is always the illumination of what's been developing, what's been building, the seed that was planted. So it could be some short-term thing, it could be some longer-term things. It depends how you are working with these lunation cycles. Now, it is a lunar eclipse, so we know that eclipses carry, a much more potent expression, manifestation, or energy. And, lunar eclipses, full moons for that matter, are always going to, in some way, shape, or form, stir something up, right? Because they highlight, they illuminate what's otherwise hidden, as it were. So it's for better or for worse, kind of thing. We know that even in full moons, during full moons, it is even said that uh, the level of activity that's heightened out there in the world relative to crisis, such as emergency situations, is often, far more triggered, and activated during full moons. So we know that full moons, they stir things up, right, in the emotional, astral bodies, if you like. Again, though, I'm going to say this is a full moon in Sagittarius, which carries with it a lot of hope for faith and optimism and confidence. It is conjunct the South Node, opposite the North Node, which is what makes it an eclipse. Eclipses always occur with the nodal axis, the moon's nodal axis. It's the relationship between the nodes, the Earth, the Sun, and the Moon, that actually creates a solar or a lunar eclipse. Because this full moon is conjunct the South Node, we know that the South Node always speaks to past memories, paradigms, experiences, knowledge, wisdom, whatever it may be. And it is in Sagittarius, so it carries a strong tone of our philosophical orientation or cosmological orientation to life. So some matters might come up from the point of view of things that you have been following, believing in, and perhaps this full moon can highlight some matters to you around that from the point of view of, well, actually, this doesn't seem to really work for me anymore. We are allowed to change our mind, it's part of evolution, it's part of growing, growing into different states of understanding, growing into different states of consciousness. That doesn't happen overnight, and one lunar eclipse is not going to, be the pivotal representation of a massive awakening in life, but if that was to happen to somebody, that would be reflected through and pointed through a series of things that are happening in your chart, right? So a lunar eclipse can't do that on its own. My experience has been when somebody has a huge awakening, for lack of a better word, or a cataclysmic event, a real critical event in life, there is usually at least 5 or 6 things, major things, hitting off a person's chart, such as eclipses, progressions, transits, primary directions, and other techniques as well. So there's a series of things that line up. Again, that's part of becoming, holding on a little bit too much to what we want to see, So what I'm suggesting is that because Sagittarius is the archetype and Jupiter that corresponds to truth, the greater truth, the truth from the point of view of nature, we could say, not not man-made ideas. It's more about what is true in nature is true in life. We can't deny that level of truth that exists in nature that we get to witness every single day. So I guess the invitation is about coming closer to the sense of natural order and truth inside your own level of understanding and consciousness. And also, when we bring in esoteric astrology, which I like to do, Sagittarius is actually ruled by the Earth. Now, the Earth is not a planet that is used in exoteric astrology, but in esoteric astrology, it's used, it's understood, it's worked with. And to put it very simply, the Earth is always opposite the Sun in your birth chart, right? So if your Sun is in Libra, the Earth's going to be in Aries. If your Sun's in Scorpio, the Earth is going to be in Taurus, and so on and so forth. And very simply put, if we think about the Sun, especially on an esoteric level, it shows the creative purpose of the individual as incarnate into this physical body, that creative spark and purpose. And the Earth, which sits opposite the Sun, shows the area of life in which the person is going to actualize that creative spark. So let's just bring up the chart and look at a few things. I haven't put the Earth in, but you can just visualize it. It's pretty easy to do. So this is the lunar eclipse chart. This is for Melbourne, Australian Eastern Standard Time. So the location of things in this particular instance doesn't really matter unless you're living in Melbourne. So again, what you really need to be looking at is, where is this axis of Sagittarius and Gemini in your birth chart? So which houses are Sagittarius and Gemini contained in your birth chart? That is the area where this lunar eclipse is being activated. So here's the moon conjunct the south node, which, as I said, because the south node corresponds to past matters, then this is a lunar eclipse that's pointing to a powerful release point of things that we need to release that correspond to Sagittarius, which is about our um, our philosophical, spiritual, religious, or cosmological orientation to our life. There may be something that's highlighted there that is really ready to be released. It's a lunar eclipse, so it's highlighting. It's a south node conjunction, so it's the past, so it is releasing. Now, if we think about the esoteric component, where I said that wherever the sun is, the earth is going to be opposite. So in this case, we have the earth right here with the south node and the moon. So we can think about that from the point of view of relative to this lunar eclipse. Well, first of all, just one other very important point about the difference between um, the position of the earth in the chart from an esoteric level. So Sagittarius is ruled by the earth. That's one thing. The other point is that Sagittarius corresponds to ray number 3. Ray number 3 is ruled by Saturn. So there's a few layers to this. And the way to understand that is that the way it's understood in esoteric astrology is that ray number 3, it connects to intelligence, basically. But we're not talking about the level of intelligence that's just retained or manifested through the left brain from the point of view of self as such. It's a level of intelligence that has extreme creative purpose to it. And esoterically, Saturn, and also exoterically, Saturn corresponds to our karma. So, with that in mind, the earth corresponds to our dharma. So, the way to understand that relative to this full moon, it's like Saturn connecting to the third ray, which connects to Sagittarius. The earth is conjunct the moon here, the lunar eclipse. It's pointing to our karma and dharma, you could say. And the karma is always there and it's always unfolding. And karma is neither good or bad, right or wrong, by the way. It's just simply, just to use an old expression, what we sow is what we reap. You know, it's our our actions have consequences, whether we are aware of that or not, or whether we choose to ignore that or not. Doesn't matter. It does. It just does. So we may not meet something this lifetime, but we'll meet it in the next lifetime. It's just how it goes. It's just how the dance goes. So what we're looking at here is relative to our Dharma, which is the Earth, which is conjunct this lunar eclipse. It's what are we trying to, what's being highlighted to us in our path of Dharma, which is what we're doing here on the Earth plane. It's the work that we do on ourselves so that we can contribute to the human family in a way that's going to be a lot more constructive and positive and inclusive. So, and of course, Saturn is our personal karma that we bring into this lifetime. And then we also have the collective um, karma, if you like, as well. But just relative to your own chart, some things to consider is, well, where is Sag Gemini in your chart? Lunar eclipse hitting off those two houses in your life. The house where the moon is at specifically, that's going to be extremely highlighted. A particular house points to a very specific area of life. It's very specific. If it's the 11th house, which as it's shown here in this particular chart, let's just say that you had Sag in your 11th, then it's got to do with friendships. It's got to do with group activity, communities. It's got to do with any social platforms that you may be involved in, or courses or groups or teaching, people that are interacting with you. That area of life is extremely highlighted. There are things that need to be kind of moved on from, as it were, because it's a South Node experience, right? And it's also about your shining through with your creative purpose relative to your Dharma. What are you here to do? What are you doing? What is the purpose of what you are doing? The earth anchors us into this physical body, as it were, into this physical dimension, um, because it is the place where we resolve the dilemma of what's called in esoteric astrology the animal kingdom and the soul. That is to bring the soul and the personality together in alignment. So these are just some of my suggestions that, could be considered relative to this full moon. It's not too heavy, it's got some pretty good aspects. Jupiter is actually squaring both the sun and the moon. So this is called a T square, right? And T squares are usually quite challenging aspect patterns in the birth chart or in a transit chart. But most of the most of the things that are written about Jupiter squaring the sun and the moon, or even other planets for that matter, because of the inherent nature of Jupiter being, it has inherent goodness, abundance, growth, opportunities, expansion. It's the good stuff. It's the stuff that we experience that brings deep satisfaction and fulfillment inside us, from the point of view of our journey in terms of growth and development, right? So Jupiter inherently is not a harmful planet. And Jupiter in Pisces, which it recently ingressed to, as we know, it's in its own home sign. So Jupiter is lapping it up in Pisces. It's very content. And forming a square to the full moon is not a problem. It's just really going to energize and amplify the energy of this full moon. If there was anything that we could point to, it would be two things that we could point to regarding this Jupiter squaring the full moon lunar eclipse, is that we might do something in excess, because Jupiter rules what we do in life. It corresponds to anything that's over the top, right? That we maybe have gone too far. So that's really one of the only main points that we kind of need to consider when it comes to Jupiter energy. So it's just about just being a little bit aware of that. And the other point, of course, which corresponds to Jupiter in Sagittarius, that has a bit of a can have a bit of a downside, would be the level of where one might have a self-righteous attitude in that, or that, would subsequently produce a level of arrogance. Like, I know what I'm talking about. I'm right. You're wrong. My truth is the truth. It's the way. It's the only way, etc., etc. And that might just play out even in basic, everyday, normal conversations as well. It doesn't have to be with deep philosophical, spiritual content, although it usually is, because Sagittarius, that's what it inspires. That's what it activates. That those components within us that correspond to our seeking of truth and meaning to our life, right? So they're the only two things that we kind of need to, be aware of: excess and perhaps a level of arrogance if it's there for some people, right? So it's not, it's not crisis, right? It's not cataclysmic. They're pretty minor things, but it depends on the individual and how that kind of component may or may not play out. But overall, we're talking about a lunar eclipse, which is in a fire, mutable sign ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is in its rulership, it's forming a square, which means it's just amplifying the energy of this lunar eclipse. So just lap it up, enjoy it, just enjoy what it shows you, what it teaches you. Sagittarius is the archetype that corresponds to the teacher, the teachings, the sacred spiritual teachings of the meaning of your life, right? Because everyone has a different connection to that, a different understanding, and everyone is at a different level of what they are ready to hear and receive, right? So no one's truth is, 100% the way for every single soul on the planet. That's absurd. That's why Krishnamurti said truth is a pathless land, because it is. It's our own personal, unique journey. And we attract and vibe towards certain individuals or groups or teachings that align with us at any given moment relative to our growth, right? So there's no right or wrong, okay? So what else do we have here? We have the Jupiter square, which, as I said, just a total amplification of the energy. We have transiting Chiron at 11 or virtually 12 degrees of Aries, which forms a trine to this full moon. So that's a really positive, supportive aspect by Chiron, indicating potential healing through things that you either are ready to release or through a new path that's shown to you. The path is Sagittarius, it always is. And the path is activated here on the earth, hence the earth ruling Sagittarius in esoteric astrology. Where do we do our work when we are incarnate in the physical body? We do it here on the earth plane. We may be extremely spiritually inclined and very immersed and involved in our spiritual development and evolution, but we are still participating and engaged with the earth because we are in a physical body. So the work that we are doing is contributing to the people around us, our loved ones, people we connect with, society at large, our tribes, our families, our soul families, etc., etc. But it is happening and unfolding here on the earth plane. So sometimes we can get really, which is a very Pisces thing to do, we can get so immersed. This can be very Sagittarius as well, immersed and lost in, diving deeply into our spiritual journey, right? And we can forget the importance of the sacredness that is here as well, here on the earth plane, and how we contribute to that by integration and embodiment into our consciousness, so that we can be a vehicle of expressing those components, which is divine source creation to all things, God, goddess, nature, mother earth, the connection of all of that. And yeah, and just not not sort of creating a perspective of simple things in life as being discarded as totally insignificant. Everything is significant on some level, right? But how significant it is at any given moment is another story altogether and is the key to understanding what's happening in your life at any given moment. And an example of that would be if you looked at your chart now, your birth chart, and you had a look at every single transit, progression, primary direction. What else could we throw in? We could throw in medieval techniques, which shows your Fedaria periods, what Fedaria period you're in. We can add in the perfected house that you are in, which is the technique of perfections, the annual, annual house placement that you are in every year. In other words, there's so many things that you could look at, and if you looked at all of that and were not able to discern what what you really need to pay attention to at the moment, what is truly speaking to you, the only thing you're going to discover is that you're lost in a myriad of information that absolutely makes no sense. It's just information, which is Gemini. And Sagittarius is about finding the meaning in what you see. That's the difference between Sag and Gemini, right? So this is a pretty big theme here, given the lunar eclipse is in Sag, right? Okay, so what else? So Mercury is conjunct Venus in this chart, which is that's not a problem. That's a beautiful aspect, actually. It can point to a few different things. I've discussed it previously, so I won't go into that right now. But the point, actually, really about this chart relative to Mercury is that Mercury is slowing down in his movement because he's preparing to step into his retrograde period, which happens on the 30th of May. So Mercury is slowed down quite significantly at the moment, and he's in his shadow period as well. So, there could be some matters of communication that where there might be some hiccups, miscommunication, misunderstanding, assuming things and so forth. So let's just kind of be aware of that as well. Um, the other thing is, as well, with this lunar eclipse relative to releasing things and leaving old things behind, that could include a person, a group of people, um, a destination, a workplace. It could include anything. It just depends where this lunar eclipse is in your chart. But it is about releasing and leaving something behind. That could connect to a more longer term sort of experience of your life, or it could be just something that's fairly new and fairly sort of in the here and now, and that really doesn't carry a massive, significant meaning in your life as such, but it's just being more clear about, well, actually, I don't, that doesn't really suit me, that particular thing, person, event, conversation, whatever. It just, yeah, it's like I can just let that go now. It's neither here nor there. It can be simple things like that as well, but it's about awareness of those things as they present, because the temptation with Sagittarius can be, um, it can be trying to be right. It's that whole self-righteous thing that can come up. That's the only downside here. Okay, and here we have, as you can see, Pallas Athena and Neptune exactly conjunct, and I have spoken about that. Um, so there they are there, Pallas and Neptune, like virtually exactly conjunct during this lunar eclipse. So there's a strong, strong, strong Pisces, Sag, Neptune energy frequency to this lunation cycle, this lunar eclipse, which is followed by, as I said, the June eclipse in Gemini, which is extremely favorable. So we're very lucky. Let's just make the most out of understanding more of our own life, appreciating appreciating generosity, being generous. Generosity corresponds to Jupiter and Sagittarius. So let's enjoy that, embrace that, either by giving and receiving as well. And yeah, just slap it up. I really wanted to keep this video really quite simple. Some of the more complex components that I added were the esoteric things, but I tried to keep it, really basic, as simple as possible, just to give us another window, another lens to kind of look through when we're working with this lunar eclipse energy, which, yeah, to me feels fundamentally quite optimistic and quite good. Okay, I think that's about it. The Palace Neptune, yeah, as I said, spiritual insight, spiritual vision. Jupiter in Pisces is adding to that. Another way to integrate this energy is to really sharpen and nurture your intuitive faculties and psychic faculties. We all have them. We all have a third eye, as I said before, the pineal gland, which is the third eye. We all have that. So that would indicate that we all have some kind of capacity with our clear seeing, which is Pallas Athena, clear seeing. Admittedly, in Pisces and conjunct Neptune in Pisces, it can be projected. When it's projected through the personality level of glamour, which is Neptune at the personality level, glamour, it can produce disappointment because what we're seeing is not what actually is in front of us. We're just seeing what we want to see. So if we're not aware of that, that's something that could, trip us over. It could, make us feel, or not make us, but it could bring a sense of disappointment about something. So yeah, we just kind of need to be aware of that. But at the more transcended level, it's really about clear visions from your highest psychic self and centers. And so working on those components within yourself. Now, everyone works on those aspects very differently. It just depends, I suppose, what you're into, what appeals to you. Personally, I find meditation extremely powerful for nurturing my intuition, nurturing and opening more of my third eye. And also, I feel that trusting instincts, I've had many, many, many times my intuition just continues to work in very powerful ways. And when I don't listen to it, because there's a side to me that is a little bit more giving and compassionate, sometimes more than I should be in certain situations, my intuition never fails me. I had an intuitive sense about something just recently, and I just let it go. I let it slide. I didn't, honor that message that was coming to me. And what unfolded subsequently was what I was ignoring, which I knew I was. So these energies here are extremely powerful for these sorts of experiences at the moment, and especially if you are very intuitive anyway. So this is all part of the lunar eclipse, Sag, Jupiter, Neptune, Pallas Athena in Pisces, strong Pisces energy. We have an abundance of Gemini going on here too, so that's all the communications, information, learning, and so forth, and the information that's that is given and that is also absorbed, and perhaps just being discerning. Discernment is a very good word, actually, for what you're absorbing mentally with all this Gemini going on here. especially with Jupiter squaring all this stuff. Yeah, it's just something to be mindful of. Okay, I think I'm done for now. Saturn went retrograde recently. Well, it's actually going to happen in 2 days' time, as I'm doing this video just a few days before the eclipse. I just wanted to bring it out a little bit earlier. I'll talk about Saturn retrograde in another video. I posted something which a lot of people did appreciate. I just wrote some things about what to consider with Saturn retrograde, and perhaps I'll do a video and just add a little bit more to what I've already said. What else do we have going? Pluto went retrograde not too long ago, 28th of April, in fact. And later in the year, starting, well, actually next month, really, Jupiter goes retrograde, and then not long after, Neptune goes retrograde, and then a couple of months after that, Uranus goes retrograde. But that's all moving ahead, and we will look at that one step at a time. Yeah. So I think for now, it's just important to consider, I suppose, relative to this lunar eclipse, Mercury's in his shadows. That often creates some hiccups with communication. It's slowing down, ready to go retrograde. And Pluto is retrograde, Saturn's retrograde. So I guess the other thing we could say with this as well, because Pluto and Saturn are both retrograde, um, that is an invitation to be more connected to the inner dimensions, the inner understanding, inner knowing, inner seeking, relative to this full moon eclipse as well. Just a point to think about. Okie dokie, I'm going to. Is there anything else there? There's an exact Uranus Vesta square at the moment. Sorry, pardon me, trine. Trine, rather. I find that really interesting. Vesta is about what we invest in. Uranus is in Taurus, which is the sign of investments. So that's quite a good aspect, actually, Uranus trine Vesta. That's what I was thinking. Hygeia is square Uranus. Health, hygiene, sudden, unexpected situations can occur with health. And that could, I don't like to really speak about this, but that could speak to the collective health crisis that we kind of have going on at the moment. Be very interesting to see, because when all this started, Hygeia was in Gemini, which is when all the wash your hands came out. We down, I don't know what it was like in where you guys live, but down here they were promoting wash your hands 100 times a day practically, and they were just um, invading people's brain space on a daily level through media, through even if you're on the tram, or like as in public transport, they'd have announcements every couple of minutes about washing your hands. You in the supermarkets, wherever we went, it was just an overload of drumming that into people's consciousness, right? So Hygeia is a big part to this collective crisis of the C19 situation, right? And so here she is now squaring Uranus, pretty much exact at this lunar eclipse. So this might be a pretty significant activation point from the point of view of those bigger collective things that are going on. And it is a square, so it is stressful, but the squares always promote change. It's what promotes change. So that would be the positive component. Okie dokie. I just kind of noticed that right then, which is why I decided to speak about it. Oh yeah. Actually, no. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to go Happy full moon, happy lunar eclipse in Sag. Hope it lifts your spirits and hope you can just enjoy it for what it is. Let it rise what it needs to rise, and then let things fall and move away as they need to, as best that you can. Much love and bye for now. See you soon.